I had been planning this road trip for months. I had mapped out my route, packed my bags, and filled up the tank of my car. A friend was supposed to go with me too, but last minute an emergency came up for him. I was already looking forward to this, so I just went on this road trip by myself. I didn't have any fancy places in mind. My plan was just to drive and do some sightseeing here and there. As I drove down the open highway, the wind blowing through my hair, I felt a sense of freedom and adventure. My plan was to get away for a couple of days. The first night went great. At night I pulled into a rest stop and slept there, as I always wanted to see what sleeping at rest stops were like. The next few days went by without a hitch. I pulled into a somewhat messy rest stop, but I didn't mind, as I was too tired to do anything else. At night, I suddenly woke up to the sound of some noises. I listened very intently, but when I didn't hear anything else, I positioned myself to go back to sleep. When I was about to fall asleep again, I heard the noises again. This time I could hear it clearly. It sounded like someone was on a tree and jumping around. It sounded too big to be a bird. At first I thought it was a monkey, but I quickly threw that out of the window because the likelihood of it being a monkey is rare. What now? I listened even more carefully, and then I could hear breathing up there too. The breathing sounded like someone was choking. I couldn't take it anymore, so I grabbed my flashlight and checked the tree through the window. There was nothing at all. In fact, I couldn't hear the noises at all too. It was nerve-wracking. I knew something was wrong, so I turned on the engine and turned on the high beam. The sound of the car turning on gave me newfound energy, so I flashed my light up the tree one more time. This time, I could see it. Someone was up there, just sitting on a huge branch, looking down at me motionlessly. It looked like a man, but some of the branches blocked me from seeing him clearly. Then all of a sudden, he just started jumping up and down again, making these weird choking noises. He then jumped to the other parked car near mine and just stared at me in the dark. When I take a closer look, to my horror, it has a long tail moving back and forth. It's standing tall like a man, and it seems like it's missing his nose. I did not want to stay any longer, so I stepped on the gas and just sped the hell away from there. My tiredness was gone, so I just kept on driving and driving all the way to my house. I'm not even sure what I just saw, but all I know was that I just had to get out of there as fast as I could. I told my friend about it the next day, and he had the idea for us to go back with a few friends and stay at that exact spot for a night to see what was going on. I shot down that idea, as I did not want to do anything that involved going there again. A few of my friends and I had the idea of going on a road trip from California all the way to Minnesota. It was quite a long ride, but we wanted to try it one time. We planned everything thoroughly, making sure we got everything we needed. The day finally came, and we were excited to go. The first few hours were bland. It was just endless stretches of the highway, and the occasional gas station stops to buy more stuff to eat along the way. As the day went by, we passed through some stunning landscapes. We drove through the desert that felt like it would never end. We crossed mountain ranges, watching as the scenery shifted from lush forests to barren peaks. When it was night, at first we were going to take turns driving, but then we decided that we would park on a little campsite nearby and enjoy our night there instead. We set up camp, starting a small fire and roasting marshmallows while we chatted and laughed. It felt amazing just being out there in the middle of nowhere and just stare at the sky while talking about our dreams and goals. It was then that one of my friends gave a shout and startled us. He said that he saw a woman by a tree near us, but the moment he screamed, the woman went behind the tree. A few of us went out to check around the tree, but we couldn't see anyone. We thought maybe he was just imagining things, so we just laugh and joke with him about the situation. Before long, it was already midnight. We all decided to call it a night, so we went into our tents. My tent was with 2 other friends. A few hours later, I woke up because I had to go pee. I was not looking forward to go out in the darkness, but I couldn't hold it in for much longer. I stepped out and decided to pee just a few feet away. In the middle of my business, I heard some branches breaking, like someone was stepping on them. I looked out, but since it was so dark, I couldn't see that far. I quickly finished and turned back to go in the tent. The moment I turned around, my shoulder bumped into someone. I lost my balance and had to control myself not to fall down. I thought it was my friend, so I raised my voice to ask if he was also going to pee. When I heard nothing, I looked up, but there was no one there. I looked around, but I didn't see anyone too. I started to have goosebumps at this point, so I quickly ran into the tent and shut the zipper. When I was safely in, I covered myself with my blanket and just stood there motionlessly, wanting to see if I could hear anything out there. I let out a breath a few minutes later and was about to sleep when I felt one of my friends getting up to go out. I thought he was going to go pee, so I didn't say anything. After what felt like forever and he didn't come back, I got up to shut the zipper as it was too cold. Before I did so, I took a glance out, but I didn't see him, so I just assumed he went a bit far. I then looked at my other friend who was still sleeping to see who went out, but when I did, I froze. My two friends were still there, sleeping. I shook my head and looked at them again. It was then that I heard someone calling my name out in the darkness. I didn't even bother to look, I just closed the zipper and ran back to my spot. I changed my mind, so I went to lay down between my friends. I did not go to sleep until way later. That morning I told everyone what had happened, and one of my friends from the other tent told me he experienced something very similar too. We just packed up everything and drove away. The weird thing was that was the only night that something like that happened. I am a city folk, so when I heard my friends were planning on a road trip, I was not excited about it. In fact, I was planning on not going at all, but one of my friends was very persuasive. I decided to go in the end. The plan was only to go for a night out driving and come back the next day. It was doable. We only packed the essentials and drove away. After a while we drove past a cemetery, and for some reason I started to have the sense that someone was staring at me from outside. Even when we drove past it, I still had that feeling. It only went away after we were miles away from the cemetery. After a while we found a good rest stop to spend the night. Campfire was allowed too, so we quickly made the fire and started cooking. Very soon after that, it was already getting dark. We sat around the campfire and just enjoyed the moment. All of a sudden, I started to have that feeling again, like someone was watching me from behind. I took a quick glance back, but there was nothing there. At around 10 p.m. when we were at our peak of having fun, I felt it again. This time was different though, because the feeling wouldn't go away. I kept glancing back and forth, trying to locate the source of it. One of my friends noticed this and asked me what I was doing. I told him about everything, how I first felt it at the cemetery. After a while, we didn't see anything, so we went back to having fun. At around 12 midnight, we called it a night, and everything started leaving to their respective tents. I looked at my tent and saw that my friend was already going inside, so I ran up to the tent to go in too. When I went in, my breath froze as I did not see anyone at all. I carefully backed out and was confused, thinking if maybe I was just imagining things. Up ahead, I saw that my friend was still washing his hands. He then came to the tent and told me to go inside. I didn't want to think about what I saw because I didn't want to acknowledge it. I was afraid if I do, something even more scary might happen. I went in, popped in my Bluetooth headphone, and went to sleep. I had a weird dream that night. I dreamed that when I woke up, I was underground, being buried alive. It felt so real that I started to have a panic attack. I tried to dig myself out, and I could feel bloods coming out of my hands. It was a horrible feeling, and when I thought I was going to die from the panic attack, I suddenly woke up with sweats all over my face. I was very relieved when I realized it was just a dream. My headphone was dead, so I was about to grab it to check what happened when I noticed waters dropping onto my face. My first thought was that it was raining and the tent was leaking, but I didn't hear any rain sounds, so I looked up to see what was going on. I then saw a man standing over me. His mouth was wide open, and waters was coming out of his mouth and falling on me. His eyes were staring right into my soul, and I could actually feel my soul shaking. When I felt him moving his head closer to me, as if he wanted to take a closer look at me, I let out the loudest scream I could muster. I just screamed and screamed, and my friend from beside me jolted up and had to slap me to snap out of it. I woke up basically the entire crew, and they all rushed over to my tent. It was a long explanation. More friends had to sleep in the tent with me. That was my first and last road trip.